Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavinsky's Tutorials. Today is part 2 of a two-part series on Bram Bos's Rozeta Sequencer Suite, a wonderful collection of Midi apps that just has so many uses. I'll put a link to my part 1 video above so you can go and watch that if you haven't watched that. In that video I covered about half of the apps. Today I'm going to look at the remaining 5: Rozeta XY, Rozeta Rhythm, Rozeta Collider, LFO, and cells. Now, I'm going to start with a little jam that I've got going here in AUM. And let me just explain first roughly what's going on. Then I'm just going to let you hear it. And then I'm going to go into more detail about what the apps are doing. So here we have an instance of Mersenne by iSgear. And that is being played by Collider. We're also modulating some things in Mersenne with Rozeta LFO, and later in the video I'll show you everything about how to go into the parameters in AUM and set everything up. A lot of people who are newer to iOS don't know how to do this, or newer to AUM. Of course, I'm doing this in AUM, but this all applies to whatever other DAW or host you might be using. Cubasis, Ape Matrix, whatever. Okay, then we have an instance of Skaka here, and an instance of Rolly Noise, and they are being played by two instances of Rozeta Rhythm. And then while these things are doing their thing, powered by Midi, I'm going to just play over the top of it with an instance of Bass 808, such a great sounding bass synth by AudioKit. Now I've got 3 copies of the Rozeta Sequencer Suite to give away to subscribers to the channel. Don't worry if you're not a subscriber, you can subscribe now. All the details of what you need to do to win and when the winners will be announced, etc., is in the pinned comment at the top of the YouTube comment section. Good luck, everybody. All right, so let's just let you hear this first, and then I'll go in more detail to what's actually going on, how to use the apps. So, nice little groove we've got going on there. Let me pop back in a second and explain in detail exactly what's going on and where. Okay, so we'll look first at Rozeta LFOs. Now, if we look at Mersenne, we can see that this filter frequency cutoff is just moving on its own. That is being modulated by one of the LFOs. And if we look here, we can see that the noise grain is also being modulated by another LFO. So let's listen to what that sounds like. And let's look at the LFO itself. And just explain how the app is laid out and so on. So we have 3 LFOs here. And here we can see the CC numbers for each LFO, so 13, 15, and 17. We can change these, by the way, okay, if we want to use different numbers, we can. Now, here we see the 3 waveforms of the LFOs. Here we set the shape of the LFO, so you can see at the moment it's sine, but we can see, for example, we could choose another one of these. For example, sample and hold, it's going to jump around randomly. Let's put it back to sine. Now, here we set our LFO rate for the first LFO, second LFO, third LFO. This is cool. Here we can use this second LFO basically to modulate the first LFO. So look at the first waveform and see here when I change this, how this waveform has now become more irregular. So this can help us introduce variety into things if we want. See, now it's gone back to being completely regular. We can sync this LFO rate to our host. We can quantize that if we want, but I'm keeping it on free, so it's in hertz value here for now. Here we can just turn the LFOs on and off, and this is very useful. Here we can set the minimum and maximum values. So we can see if I put this to a high value, for example, you can see now the LFO has a much smaller range to roam in. It's basically only staying up at the top of the waveforms here. So let's bring it back down. If I bring it back down to the bottom, down to 0, now it's got full range. Okay, now a lot of people who are newer to iOS and maybe new to AUM, for example, although these things apply to any host that you're using, as long as it can, take Midi, FX. A lot of people don't know how to set this up, so I'm going to look at that now. So what we do here in AUM is first we just click on this, Midi sources, right? So just again, so we click on the bottom of the channel, we click on the name of the instrument, 2, Mersenne, click here, go to Midi sources, and you can see I've got Rozeta LFO set as a source. Then we click on this button to go back, and then go into Mersenne, and you can see here we've got different names for different parameters. So we find what we want to modulate. So here you can see noise grain. I've already set this up. So sending channel 1, CC13. So that's the first LFO, if you remember. It's sending on CC13. So we do that by clicking on this and setting our channel here. So it's channel 1 generally. And here we choose the CC number we want to use. We can also set the range here, but in this case there is no need to do that because we can control that range in Rozeta LFOs itself, as I showed you, using these sliders. That is going to be much easier to tweak than having to go into AUM to do it every time. So that's how we set up the LFO. Okay, now I'll take a look at Collider. So in Collider, we basically have a grid where we have these little dots moving around, and here we can set our scale and key, and we use this button to generate a new pattern. Here we can see the size of the grid and the number of hadrons, these little dots that are moving around. Here we can adjust our pitch and velocity, and I'll let you hear all these things in a second. Now here we can control a few different things. So collision bounce, basically that will mean when two dots hit each other, they will maybe change direction. Collision sound means that when two hadrons hit each other, there will be a sound, so we can turn that on or off. Wall sound, so here, when a hadron hits the edge of the grid, it will make a sound, and again, we can turn that off. Now here we adjust our grid size, the number of hadrons, the clock division, and the gate length. So let me just experiment and play with these things and let you hear how we can change the sound by playing with these. So let's increase the grid size. So now we're getting two different notes. Now see, if I turn off collision sound and wall sound, we'll get no sound, right? So you're going to need to have at least one of these on to get sound. So here we're only getting sounds when hadrons collide, but not when they touch the wall. Now we're getting when they touch the wall as well. Okay, so let's make the grid bigger. We'll get more musical variety. Now we could change our key, for example. So now we've got a major key. And there are quite a few different keys to choose from. Let's experiment with Hadron number. So now we're getting a lot more space in our melody. This velocity doesn't seem to be making much difference. Must be something to do with the way Mersenne is set up. Let's change clock division. I love triplets. So here, maybe we want to increase the number of hadrons. Now gate length. So here our notes are allowed to carry on their natural sustain more. Here we're getting shorter sounds. So generate, we can generate a new pattern. A nudge is basically a kind of mutate. It won't change everything, but it'll alter it. Okay, so there we go. There's Rozeta Collider and Rozeta LFO. Let's take a look at rhythm. I've switched out to another instance of AUM because I want to show you Rozeta Rhythm playing Rausmacher, one of Bram's great drum synths. Rozeta Rhythm is really cool. So have a listen here. What I'm going to do just as I play this is I'm going to play around with the number of beats on the clap channel. By the way, I'm putting this through Blease's new Saturator app, which, depending on when this video comes out, may not be out yet, so I'm not going to show it to you, but I don't think Vianney will mind me teasing it a little bit in this video. It's really great, and I'll make a video on it when it comes out. You can hear the difference here. Got a lot more punch, right? Let me play with the number of beats of the clap. Let's take a look at what's going on. So first thing to pay attention to is what is highlighted here in these channels. So the clap is highlighted, and that means that all of these buttons here are going to apply changes to the clap, not to other things. If I instead select bass drum, then all of these things and changes I make here will apply to the bass drum. So we can change the number of steps. So at the moment you can see the clap is on 13-step pattern. The bass drum is on a 16-step pattern. So you see, you can see here how long each pattern is. So what we're getting here is really, really cool polyrhythms, and this will keep things interesting instead of just being too repetitive. We can change the number of beats. So you can see at the moment there are 3 beats, and now there are 4. Here we can shift the beats to the right or to the left. Here we change the way accents are dealt with. So when this is on, let me put more beats in first. Okay, so when this is on 1, every single beat will have an accent. Here, every second beat will have an accent. Here, every third beat will have an accent. But why then? Let me see. Because of the shift. Right, see. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you change the shift that's also going to change the accents. So you're going to have to play around with the number of accents and the shift to get things exactly the way you want them. And then here we can use this mutate function to bring some randomization into things. Now here we can randomize our pattern. So let's just go in and randomize everything. So here I'm selecting all of the channels, generate. Now let's have a listen. And I'll just play this and I'll generate new patterns as I go along. Now let's say I only want to change, let's say I like the bass drum and the snare and the clap, but I want to change these things. Then I deselect these and generate, and only these ones will change. These will stay the same. So that's really good. Now here we select our key maps. So different drum synths will take their channel information on different CCs. So there are already a lot of these set up in here. And you can just, make your own changes here, so you can end up with something customized to whatever it is that you want to use. Here we choose, if we set up Midi control, Midi triggers patterns, then we can send in our keyboard. Okay, so if I use the keyboard here, I can use notes here to trigger changes in which patterns are playing. So let's look here. And in this one, I've got a pattern here. On one, I've got a pattern on two. Let's say, for example, I want to set up a third pattern, and I want to base it on pattern two, but I want to change it a little bit. What I can do is go to this copy button here, press copy, then I go into 3, I press paste, and now that's there, and then I can make a few changes. Put in a few more beats, for example. So we've basically got a kind of song mode here, which we can trigger with our keyboard if we want. It's great. So that's the main features of Rozeta Rhythm. Now let's move on and look at something else. So we're looking now at Rozeta Cells, which is a step sequencer that is very, very easy to use. And I'm going to use it to play Zeon. So I'm using a sound from one of the Sound of Izrael preset packs for Zeon. I'll put a link below in the pinned YouTube comment and in the video description for this video for Sam's details if you want to buy this preset pack. It's only a couple of dollars and it has hundreds of sounds, 215 in fact. Really, Sam makes great presets. I made a video before on his Iceworks synths presets. Check that out if you haven't seen it. These presets are just equally as good, really fantastic. And I love the name of this one, COVID-19. Yeah, I don't know exactly what the relevance of this preset to COVID-19 is, but it's a nice sounding preset. Let's have a little listen. So here I've got this sequencer on random. Let me change it to linear. And here's bounce. Now it's going backwards and then forwards. If it's on linear, it will just go forwards and then go back to the first step again. There's another one called Move Free. That one only works when you have more than one line. What it'll do is when you have more than one line here, it'll kind of move around between the lines. Okay, so let's look at how to enter steps in this. So we basically, okay, I'll press here to get keyboard input. I'm going to press here, record. So I've entered a few steps there, and now when I play, it's going to have those steps added in. And I just played single notes there, but you can play chords as well. So I click here and I'll press record and I'll just put in a chord. And so you can see here now, you can see that there are 3 notes in that chord. So that's basically how this works. It's very simple. Now also we can add empty spaces or rests. Now if I have advance selected, after I play some notes in, it'll move forward automatically to the next step. If I have advance deselected, it won't. I'm going to have to select it manually. So that's basically how this works. And again, similar to rhythm, we have different patterns we can set up here. I just got to turn off record. So we can set up different patterns and we can copy and paste the same way that we saw before. We can also change the length of the steps. Now this is universal, it's not per step. And we can also change the gate length. Let's just have a little play with those. We can also apply shuffle. And we can remove steps using this button. So that's Rozeta cells. Again, using the Midi thing here, we can choose Midi triggers patterns, and then we can use our keyboard to move around between the patterns. Okay, let's move on. So we're looking now at Rozeta XY, which is a pair of XY pads that we can assign to modulate different parameters. It also has a pitch bend and a mod wheel. Now let's have a little listen first. I got quite an extreme example here. So I'm using fundamental and I'm putting it through bit juggler. I've also got volbot on here, providing some amplitude modulation. Let's have a little listen. Heavy stuff there. All right, let's talk about what's going on. So this XY pad, we've got 2 here. This one is controlling some things in fundamental. So if we look here, do you see how these rate sliders are changing? So this one is changing the rate of those generators in fundamental. And I've also matched it to some pitch modulation as well. And then this second XY pad is controlling bit jugglers, resampling rate, and quantization depth. So let's see that again. So we've got rate on the y-axis, depth on the x-axis. Here I'm using the pitch bend to modulate the pitch of fundamental. So let's look at how to set that up. So if we look at the XY pad, we can see that this first pad, X is connected to CC15, the Y-axis is connected to CC13. On this pad, it's 14 and 17. So how we set that up is, again, we click on the bottom of the fundamental channel. We click on the name 2 fundamental, channel 2 fundamental. Here, MIDI source, we select Rozeta XY. And then in fundamental, we go into the parameters. And you can see I have set oscillator 1 frequency fine to CC15. Generator 1 rate CC13, generator 3 rate CC15. And again, same for bit juggler. So we'll go in here, bit juggler parameters, bit depth CC14, all channel 1, sample rate CC17. This one, I don't pay any attention to that, I'm not doing anything with that. So we can get really crazy there. Okay, let's move on. So we've actually covered all the apps already. I just want to look at one more example of using the LFO because I really like this audio example. So here I'm using the LFO to change the mix rate in ultra tap and undulator. And let's have a listen. What we've got here is a loop that I made in Gauss. I used the Korg Module Pro Cap Pro choir, really beautiful sounding choir. And I'm putting it through Yukawa for some delay, pan station for a little bit of panning, but I've brought the depth down a little bit. Shaper to give it some some grit. And then here, ultra tap delay for some more extreme kind of rhythmic delay effects, a little bit different from what Yukawa is doing, and undulator for some tremolo type effects. Let's have a listen. So that's just another little example of what the LFOs can do. The LFOs are just modulating this mix rate here, bringing in this extra texture of ultra tap and the undulator from time to time. So these Rozeta Sequencer Suite apps are just brilliant. I mean, what is the price of this? I think it's about $7, maybe $8, something like that. I'm not sure. But anyway, I mean, 10 apps included and just such great tools. Well worth buying. I love Midi. So many possibilities there. I've just shown a few little things that you can do with these things, but really the sky's the limit. So everyone, if you enjoyed this, please do remember to give it a like, subscribe if you're not a subscriber already, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future notifications when I bring out a new app video, because I usually have codes to give away and they're only available in the first 2 days, so you don't really want to miss out on those. Thanks again to Bram for creating these wonderful apps and for giving me those codes to give away. Again, if you haven't watched the first video in this series, go and watch that. I've also got videos on Gauss here, which I'm really in love with at the moment. I've been playing with it a lot. It's actually one of the reasons why I have not done so many videos the past few weeks, because I've just been really enjoying experimenting with that. I've made an absolute shitload of loops in it, which maybe when I finally get round to doing a Patreon, I'll maybe put some of those on it. Yeah, so this is another app that I've really been enjoying. I'm not actually using it here, but I'm definitely going to be making a video on this one soon as well. Step Poly ARP. Fantastic ARP and sequencer. Probably the best ARP, I think, available for iOS at the moment, at least among the audio unit ARPs. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.